not the boring side of safety, but how you can make it insightful and impactful in your organization in less of a, I'm not going to say a boring way. Most people associate safety with being boring, but in an insightful and an impactful way.
Yeah, sometimes I think people, they feel like it's a chore. It's like something that they have to do. But I will say that your product, at least the one that we use, the VOCUS part of it, really makes it easy and intuitive. And it's not a chore. It makes it easy for me to read the highlights that I really need to know. So that's super cool.
Appreciate that. Yeah,
great.
I know that a lot of folks, especially on your side, on the scheduling front, a lot of folks that are using it most efficiently have it from the scheduling point of view. Like it starts there. And that's really where you start to get a lot of the business efficiency out of it, right? Like you're seeing that weather front move through and you're able to call up and get on the hangar list before anybody else. And you don't have that de-icing bill. You don't have to do the 11th hour firefight of changing all the transportation because we just now saw a NOTAM that popped up. I mean, that's really on your side of things, getting that business efficiency out of your SMS instead of just the boring safety stuff.
Hello, and welcome to the Business Aviation Collective podcast, sponsored by LD Aviation. I'm your host, Lindsay, and today we get a chance to talk to Kellie Roby. Kellie is a Vice President of Safety Services for Polaris Aero. She has been a top 40 under 40 in 2022, so congratulations on that. She has a slew of educational items in her background, including a lot of flight hours. So I'm really excited to speak with you. Hi, Kellie.
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for having me.
So glad to talk to you today because you have a really unique background. And so I think I'm going to just start kind of like I do to most people. How did you even get into aviation? Is this something you liked when you were little?
That is a great question. I did not know directly that aviation was something that I wanted to do right off the bat. I did not discover aviation as a career path until college. So a little bit of backstory. My dad was a naval aviator. He flew P-3 Orions in the Navy, but he was done with that experience in that part of his life when kiddos came along. So I didn't really have direct exposure to that. But when I went to college, I went to Middle Tennessee State University, go Blue Raiders. And I went there on a softball scholarship, actually. I played competitive softball growing up.
Cool.
And so I was a pitcher for the MTSU softball team. And as I'm, practicing and out there on the field, we were actually right underneath the flight path for the flight school that was right next door. So we'd see all these airplanes flying over. It was really a pretty cool experience. And there were some folks that lived right across the hall from me in the athletic dorms that were aerospace majors. And we get to chatting and I figure out that you can fly airplanes for college credit. I was like, what? This is nuts. So, coach was always telling us in the spring season that we needed to take an extra course and we needed to, spread out our electives and things like that. So I said, I'm going to take an intro to aerospace class. That really sounds fun. I'm sure coach was probably like, we were really talking more like underwater basket weaving or power walking or something like that. Well, we're in season, but I really got the bug taking that first intro class. They take you up on a discovery flight and just really found my passion for aviation in that course. And if you could just imagine, I'm going to date myself for a second, but this was 2008. So like peak of the housing market crash. Yeah. Like the economy was doing super great, right? I was on a scholarship at an out of state school to play a sport. Mm-hmm. And I pick up the phone and I call my dad and I said, hey, so I think I want to fly airplanes. And at that point, I had been like a business major. I was a pre-physical therapy major. I kind of bounced around a little bit and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but this is what my heart felt compelled to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm calling him and I'm telling him this, that I want to essentially give up my scholarship, my paid for school at an out of state school.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to go fly airplanes, which is also an additional cost. It's a flight lab.
Right.
At the peak of the housing market crash, and I'm sure his 401k was looking really great. And being an aviator himself, I'm sure he was a little bit, like, that's my girl. But
yeah, I was going to ask that. Yeah, was he like super proud, or was he like, oh no, I don't know about that?
He definitely asked me, "Are you sure?" But it was one of those where he could have taken that a completely different way, given all of those factors, and he was 100% supportive. He was like, if this is what you want to do, Granted, I could taught you how to do this at home, but if this is what you want to do, then go for it. You need to, find your passion in it. And he supported me all the way through that. So that was a huge part of me taking that first step. I look back on that, having a girl myself now, and thinking about her being in college in that same situation and her trying to find her passion. And I'm like, man, I don't know that I would have handled that as well. So I really think back on that experience and really appreciate the grace that he gave me in finding my purpose.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, given that those circumstances, I was now not on scholarship at my school anymore. I needed to figure out a way to pay for Flight Lab, figure out my relationship with Sally Mae and all those good things. So I found a gig working. Well, I was served at a local restaurant first, and then through my connections at the restaurant, there was another aerospace major that said, "Hey, they're hiring at the FBO over in Nashville. You should apply. They have CSR positions, they have line service positions. This would be a great fit for someone who's interested in aviation. Get your first taste of it while you're in school." So I applied and I started working over at Atlantic Aviation in Nashville. And it's really where I got the business aviation bug, was working there at Atlantic. So
had you even really known, so you saw military aviation through your dad, but then everybody, basically knows about commercial. Did you know anything about business aviation beforehand?
I didn't. I was brand new. I mean, you walk up to the interview at Atlantic and you see the Gulfstream sitting there on the ramp and you're like, man, this is it. This is really cool. But yeah, I had no idea all of the nuance that went into business aviation and how much I would fall in love with it. Through the curriculum at MTSU, at least at that time, it was very 121 driven for the airline space. And that makes sense for the bulk of folks that run through there. But there really wasn't much that spoke to general aviation, business aviation, corporate aviation, or this space at all. So I learned a lot of that just on the job at Atlantic, which was a great foundation. It's kind of like a little I don't know what you call those, like a residency. I felt like I was doing like a residency program, like
internship. Yeah, I learned all about that.
Yeah,
I find that so interesting. So when I went to school too, there was nothing about business aviation. We didn't talk about that at all. It was all 121. So what a cool, Atlantic Aviation, FBOs in general, give so many people the opportunity to learn about an aspect that is not taught in most other places. I think it might be different now, though. I think schools are starting to recognize business aviation a lot more.
Yes. And with initiatives through NBAA and local regional groups and sort of helping them have a syllabus or at least access into business aviation, that's been a huge help in getting them plugged in that space. Something that certainly we didn't have growing up in that time. But I will say one thing that helped me the most in that particular role, I was a customer service rep. I had the ability to talk to pilots every day. So from 2 to 10, every Monday through Friday, I was there chatting with pilots, working with directors of operation and chief pilots and negotiating fuel and all those sorts of things. And steeped in that from 2 to 10 every day, Monday through Friday, was super beneficial and learning the ins and outs of things, even just building relationships and having those conversations and figuring out what it's actually like to be on the business aviation side helped propel me into this side of the business, which was really helpful.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're working at Atlantic Aviation, you're learning about that, but on the side you're flying, right?
Yes. I went through MTSU's flight school. I did all of my ratings there. So during the day, I'd be doing my classroom sessions, and then I'd run out to the airport. We'd go do some flight lessons. I did my private instruments, commercial, and multi-engine all at MTSU through their 141 flight school. So nice. Fantastic program. Certainly they took it. I'm a great example of someone they could take from zero to hero because I had no previous experience. And, they made a commercial multi-pilot out of me. So that was that kudos to them for being able to do that. As I was kind of getting out of finishing up my multi, that was about the time I was a senior in college at that point. And the landscape of aviation in that year was a little dicey, right? I'm watching my peers leave and graduate, and they're not getting hired on at airlines, or they're not, they're having to go into the military to get any sort of flight time or figure out what their path is going to be. Mm-hmm. Again, the economic situation that we were in wasn't super ideal for getting hired right out of school. So I actually stayed in an extra semester and did air traffic control, their CTI program for air traffic control. Nice. Sort of a way to hedge my bet, I guess. Yeah, finding a job and being able to pay Sally Mae eventually. So, or at least put her off for another 6 months or so. That was my idea and that. But in that extra 6 months that I stayed there, I was still working at the FBO, and I was able to create some relationships and build some relationships with base tenants that were headquartered there, that office there. And one of which knew I was getting ready to graduate, also was going through a big management change at the time at their organization, and said, you know what, we need someone who's sort of a jack of all trades, who can manage the office, who can interface with the FAA, who can help us manage our pilot schedules and all that good stuff. Would you like to just come work for us? And then, hopefully that turns into something. So I went over and I was teaching myself like Googling how to use QuickBooks. I think things that I've never done before, but that ability to just get myself into the organization eventually led to a pilot slot opening up. They said, hey, you've got your certificate, hop in the airplane, let's go get you checked out. And I ended up flying there. I started Part 91 and I flew some 91 trips. I started working on my time, eventually got checked out 135 on the Beechjet and the Hawker, and flew a little charter, got some experience under my belt. And that was a great learning experience for me right out of the gate. So.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like you just jumped in and said, yes, I will figure out how to do that job. I mean, that while you were talking about Google, a lot of our podcast guests, and I agree, people say, just say yes to it and figure it out. Shows initiative, shows motivation. Yeah. Very cool.
Absolutely. I'd say from that part of my life, the biggest thing that got me from A to B was just saying yes. Like you're saying, just say yes to everything, figure it out later. Say yes to everything. Don't turn down an opportunity for something that is along your career path or what you're wanting to do. And even things that aren't. Like I have yet to use QuickBooks again, another day in my life, but it got me in the door to those opportunities and led to things like being able to interface with the FAA and what that means, and learning about the drug program and learning about different things that gave me a good background and a good foundation for other things.
Oh, so cool. Any business experience, I know now that I run the small business, any business experience that people can get along the way, I also think is super important, because you just never know. Like you said, you'll never know when you use QuickBooks again, or how to create a drug policy. Yep. Very cool. All right. So you went in there, you were working with, and that was Secure Air Charter, if I'm looking, was that right? Okay,
that's right.
Cool. So then where did you go?
So from there, just a little bit of context of life of what was going on at the moment. My husband and I got married while we were there at Secure Air, and which was we were both there in Nashville. We were living the Nashville dream. It's much different now, a bit more of a tourist city, but we had an apartment downtown. We were living the Nashville life. We decided in the background of that, my family was still in the Dallas area, and my dad got really sick. And we decided we needed to, put down roots as a family in an aviation town, something that we would have some ability to move as needed and grow in our careers. But
did you have aviation also?
He is. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
A pilot.
Sorry.
Oh,
he's okay. All right.
That's a shocker, right? He's a pilot. We met in flight school at MTSU. So it just sort of, developed from there. We had a lot of mutual friends. And so we've been doing this aviation journey together for a little over a decade now. So it's been great.
That's so cool. Okay. Sorry, interrupted. Okay. So you said
No, you're good. Yes. So our plan was to go back to Dallas. Obviously, in that time where my dad was sick, I felt compelled to be back closer to home. And really, that's where we wanted to put our roots down anyway. Dallas is a great aviation town. For those that are unfamiliar, it's headquarters of two major airlines. And then the business aviation component in Dallas is just phenomenal. So we had a lot of opportunity there. So I took a role with Business Jet and Business Jet Access, which is now Business Jet Services there in the Dallas area. And I wasn't necessarily looking for a flying role. I was just looking to get plugged into an organization. Again, just saying yes to opportunities and get your foot in the door and then figure out what you really want to do later. So I started there as a flight operations specialist, I think is what the role was listed for. And basically it was handling pilot records, pilot training, anything that the director of operations and chief pilot needed assistance with. I did well at that. I got bored pretty quickly with that. And, you can only stare at pilot records so long before your eyes start to go cross. So they said, okay, well, here's a new opportunity for you. Why don't you manage safety? You could be our safety officer. I didn't know at the time that that was kind of a short straw to draw, but I drew it and I was like, yeah, let's learn it. Let's learn some safety. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was really going to be my passion that I found moving forward, was managing that safety aspect. Mm-hmm. And as you know, with a small company, you grow and you kind of tailor job descriptions to fit the people that you have and their strengths.
Yes,
so I ended up,
good point. Yes, so true.
So I ended up taking on not only the safety officer role, but I started managing our client services team and our charter team as well. They needed sort of a day-to-day person to do that. So it wasn't directly safety related, but it was a point of contact and someone who could speak pilot to the pilots and scheduling to the schedulers. And they just needed sort of an intermediary for that.
Okay.
And then I took on some more like contract negotiation and insurance type stuff. So they didn't really know what to call that hodgepodge of things. They just ended up calling it business manager. And it was kind of just like a conglomeration of other duties as assigned at a certain point. But it gave me a lot of experience in, again, looking at those contracts, negotiating things, insurance and the impacts of risk. And of course, the day-to-day operation of charter and managing the client services aspect of it. So that was my last role previous to Polaris. Again, sort of a meandering way through the business to give me a good background for what I'm doing here.
And now behind the scenes too, or kind of not behind the scenes, but while you were there, you were also really a big part of the North Texas Business Aviation Association, right? Was that at that same time?
Okay. Yep, exactly. That's a great segue, actually. I started there just as a member of the North Texas group, just trying to get plugged in and figure out how to benchmark ourselves against other organizations. As volunteer groups work, they recruit you in and get you into the leadership position. So I think I started maybe as secretary or one of the committee roles. And then, of course, that led into taking on a myriad of roles until I ended up as the co-chair of that organization eventually. The tricky part was I managed as co-chair through COVID, which was an unprecedented time for any local and regional group, where all your sponsorship money dries up and you're supposed to be having these events and we can't meet in person. And it was a bit of a change of thinking. And we had to kind of revamp some of the stuff we did with that group, as all local and regional groups did.
Yeah.
But that was a huge part of just being plugged into the community, to finding mentors and being in the room with the right people and just soaking up information that weren't even in your organization. They were in other parts of the business, even other parts of the industry. And that is one thing that I tell every single young person or peer in my network is get plugged in with your local and regional groups. It doesn't matter if they're a competitor. It doesn't matter if they're even in your side of the business. I would go sit at a luncheon table with a bunch of insurance folks and lawyers, and I would just sit and just soak up all of the conversation that was going on. And it makes me a better aviator for hearing that conversation. So a huge game changer.
Very true. Such a good point. Yeah. Get involved. Anything local, get involved and go to the events and network.
Absolutely. And in that aspect too, you really get out of it what you put into it. So those that are maybe a member of the organization, but aren't as plugged in, ask how you can get involved, even if it's just volunteering on a committee or helping with a certain event. Like, hey, I'll bring, the QR codes for everyone to sign in, or I'll help with registration. Any way you can plug into those events is super helpful, and it gives back and heaps beyond what you're putting into it.
So true. I agree. Yep. I've loved a lot of the volunteer stuff I've done. So, okay. So you're working like as a business manager, but got your hands in all sorts of stuff, learning there. You're doing the North Texas group. Where do you go from there? What's your next step?
So I mentioned kind of managing that group through COVID. So there is COVID kind of happening in the back of this. I know we always have to talk about COVID as like the turning point. But I don't know if we're all tired of talking about that yet or not, but it was. I mean, it was for a lot of people. So my other half had a bit of a career shakeup in the midst of COVID as well, ended up getting a new role that would put his home base in the Memphis, Tennessee area. And in kind of going back and forth on if we wanted to accept that role for him, I said, well, it's kind of hard for me to do my job at Business Jet or plugged in at NBAA from a different state. So that's probably something that I need to look at. At that same time, I got a phone call from another local and regional group leader who worked in the South Florida VAA. And he said, hey, I happen to know someone who is looking for someone in safety sales. It's a completely remote position. They need someone with some safety expertise. And he said the name of the company and then who was looking. And it was Steve Bruneau with Polaris, who I knew from his Pulsar days. And I said, Steve, I know Steve. Let me give Steve a call. And so it was through those channels that I found a home here at Polaris. And they said, we're happy to support your move to Memphis if that's what you guys are going to do. You can home office from there and we'll just, put you on the road to sell safety and all that good stuff. So it was great that I already knew the folks that I was coming to work with.
Yeah.
And I could make that move for my family, but also the connection came from that local and regional group networking. So just wanted to point that out as well. And a shout out to those folks that connected me to this relationship.
That's awesome. That's like such a good example of, I guess, teamwork or, people helping each other in this industry. And it's all over. I love it.
It is. It's so great. And, sales, I'd never done traditional sales prior to this role here at Polaris, but I did charter sales-ish, and charter sales is a little bit different, right? It's not your traditional quota sales per se. So coming into this role, I had a lot to learn, and it was similar to putting myself and Googling how to QuickBooks and that sort of stuff. Kind of felt like I was going back to the start. But Steve was great in steering me in that, how this isn't a traditional sales role per se. It's helping people with their problems and figuring out what the solution is that they need. And if we are the best solution, then that's great. And we will help them with, find that tool. And if not, we'll help them figure out what is their tool. So it was really good to come into that as a sales role and have that perspective on it. Mm-hmm. And then certainly being able to utilize the platform and see what we were selling and see the impact of how we were helping people in their organizations in a tactical way was really impactful to me and give me that purpose and that significance of what we were doing.
That's so cool. And there's, some people just love safety, and it sounds like you love it and are good at it. And then there's other people who do it more begrudgingly. But I think that, and you can talk to more about this, I think, but it seems like our industry is starting to switch away from those people who are begrudgingly doing it and doing it just to check a box. And they're really recognizing how important this is.
You're absolutely right. I think some people see it, as I mentioned earlier, as drawing the short straw and having to manage safety, right? Typically, that's when you have to go in and do all the very tedious things, and you have to have hard conversations about things that are kind of abstract, or maybe you don't have full insight on the process. And it can get a little hard to do that if you don't have meaningful data by which to have those conversations. So what I really found when I was coming on board with Polaris and the VOCUS platform was we were taking the data that people were submitting, using our tool to give them meaningful insights to have these conversations. And we're using data now. We're taking apart like dynamics within the organization. We're really giving them a means to have, A to B conversations, even in the really fuzzy stuff that goes along with safety. So I really loved that aspect of it. I loved that it wasn't just a digital version of a paper process that a lot of people seem to associate with safety, but they were really taking the look of, okay, what is a risk mitigation? Like, what does that actually mean? And it's not an Excel spreadsheet where we add numbers together. It is, let's look at the risk. Let's define what level of risk is acceptable to us as an organization, because that may be different than somebody else down the street. Yep. And by what that means to us, let's determine how we can best put a mitigation in for that. And even more so than that, things that come out of your SMS or things that come back in a debrief from your team. Now let's bake those in so that everyone else who comes through here can learn those same lessons. And it's not this perpetual like, oh yeah, we dealt with that last week, or, oh, Joe, you who was here 4 years ago, he had that same thing happen and we just forgot to write it down, or we put it in a manual and now no one read it. It was a lot of this forward thinking type of safety risk management ideology that really resonated with me. And so glad that I found a team that has that same mindset.
Yeah, that's so cool. And a lot of our clients, we use your product, so I can't say enough good things about it. And Steve, wonderful person in general. So yeah. You're with a good group. So how long have you been with them now?
I started in February of 21.
Okay.
So yeah, coming up on 3 years now.
So did
exciting
you
stuff.
move? You moved from Texas to Tennessee. Tennessee's beautiful. I love that area. But all through the pandemic, just kind of on a side note, was that hard? Like, were you even able to, how did you find a place to live? Because I understand people weren't moving and.
I won't say it was the easiest thing we've ever done. So we put our house on the market in Texas. I started this job around the same time that we put our house on the market. For those that are in Texas and remember February 2021, it was something that we had called Snowvid, which was this crazy snowstorm that came through Dallas or the DFW area and basically froze everything. It looked like, I don't even know, for those that have small children and know, like Arendelle and the frozen landscape there from the movie, that's what it looked like. And people's houses were, their pipes were bursting and they were losing electricity. And there was like a lot of stuff that was going on right in that moment. So to try to put your house on the market in the midst of all that was a bit tricky. We ended up making our way through that. But, additionally finding a house in another state and being able to compete in that time frame was really tricky as well. So not really, it would be, they'd call us and say, hey, you need to put an offer on this house within 24 hours or you're not going to get it. Well, I don't even know where this is. I have no sort of way of figuring out if this is a good school district. Is this, a place that we want to be? I don't know anything about the Memphis market. So what we ended up doing was we sold our house here in Texas and we found a plot of land out here in the woods in Tennessee. And we decided to build a house. We wouldn't have to compete with, other offers that way. And we could take our time, and we moved into a rental while we were building. Financially, probably not the most sound decision to build a house during a pandemic, but, but it at least bought us some time, right? It bought us some time where we could figure out and feel out where we were and make sure that's what we wanted to do.
Everything outside the box. Find an alternate to what everybody else was doing.
Exactly. And it was available. And you know what? And at a certain point, that's just those are the options you have. So we made it work. And so we moved not once, but twice. We moved to a rental. And then about 13 months later, we moved into the house that we live in now. But yeah, it worked out well and definitely a learning experience. A lot to learn from that.
I bet from building a house, I would like to do it someday. But yes, I've heard there's a lot of pieces to that. Especially during COVID too, because if I'm not mistaken, there was delivery delays and construction materials weren't available. And
yes, and I think lumber was the price of gold. I don't even know. It was it was something crazy, but we made our way through it, and I'd like to think that we're better for it. But time will tell, I guess.
Oh, very cool. So at this time, you're moving to Tennessee, you're getting a new job, you're building all the house, so you're super busy. You transition from the North Texas Aviation Association over to the Tennessee Aviation Association, right?
I had a college friend that lives down the street here from us, which is a huge game changer, by the way. But other than that, I didn't really have any friends here or know anyone here or know anyone in the business. There's a very big 121 cargo operator that works here, but I didn't have a whole lot of general aviation or business aviation contacts. So my first thought is practicing what I preach and getting plugged in with your local and regional groups. So I was trying to get, plugged in with Tennessee BAA. In the midst of that, I sort of needed to hand off the North Texas group to people that were there locally and find someone with, bandwidth to be able to manage that group and all that goes in with being the co-chair of that group. So there was a bit of a transition time where I was in both groups at the same time. And it made for a busy calendar, but a lot of great happy hours and networking. And I just kind of split my time between both states, which is, I don't ever mind going back to Dallas. It's a great city. So
that's awesome. I've only been to Dallas a couple of times, but I hear lots of good stuff about it. Well, let's also talk about some of the other committees. So you don't just do local and regional stuff. You do main NBAA volunteer work and specifically the PDP program review. What is that all about? What do you get to do there?
Sure. This is my favorite volunteer work that I do. No dig to the local and regional groups and no dig to any of the other councils or committees that I'm on. And certainly by the name of it, it is the least sexy group of any of the groups that I'm a part of. But it is a really fun event that we've got, a really fun group that we've got that takes any professional development course that is submitted to NBAA and reviews that for PDP credit moving forward. So we see courses from Embry-Riddle, we see courses from Dr. Prather and his group, from Service Elements, from all sorts of groups that come in that are trying to take people from where they're starting to where they're going, and really provides that next level ladder for them to get from A to B.
That's awesome. So Kellie, while you are working your new job and you're transitioning into a move, you're also doing some volunteer work, not just locally, but with the main MBAA group. And you are with the Professional Development Program Review Committee. So what does that all entail? What do you get to do there?
Yeah, this is actually my favorite volunteer work experience that I have. No dig on the regional groups or any of the other groups that I'm a part of. And it's probably the least sexy name of any group associated with NBAA. But we get to look at all of the courses that come into NBAA and review them for PDP credit, which we take the existing objectives for CAM and things like that, and make sure that the content that providers are putting out in terms of courses meets those objectives so that we can qualify them for credit. So selfishly, I love this group because not only do we get a preview and a sneak peek at all the courses that go out through NBAA, so I feel like I get to learn myself as I'm going through the course, but I also get to sit in the room with really smart people and just soak up their knowledge. The group itself is comprised of half operational leaders. So whether that's directors of operation or chief pilots or people that are in the operational space. And then the other half are educators by profession. So University of North Dakota, Western Michigan, Embry-Riddle. So all of those folks together in one room and just hearing them talk about what's going on in our industry as it relates to these courses and how can we provide material for people that are in this industry to take them to that next level outside of a standard degree. You've got your degree and you're working in, whether it's scheduling or you're a pilot or you are a maintainer and you're looking to go to that next level. This is the path for getting you from A to B and giving you those tools and resources that you may not otherwise have an opportunity to do, and fill that void of what may not have been covered in your college degree. Like we mentioned earlier back at the beginning of the podcast, there's not a whole lot in curriculum, or at least there hasn't been historically, that addresses business aviation and the way that we should be doing things to a best practices standard. So this fills that gap. And it also gives feedback to those organizations like University of North Dakota or Embry-Riddle or Western Michigan or those folks participating of what best practices are in business aviation as determined by the professionals in the room. So that's super helpful and very fulfilling for me. I know I could have used a ton of PDP courses when I was first getting started to help maybe fill in the gaps of what Google didn't know. We didn't have AI or Chat GPT back then, so there was a lot to learn in a short amount of time. So I really enjoy that quite a bit.
Well, that's so cool. And thank you for your work on that, because really the recipients, like those of us who take those PDP classes, like you said, we need them. And we always should be looking for additional ways to enhance what we're doing, learn something new. And how many PDP courses do you know how many there are? There's a lot of them, right?
Well, there's quite a few. I should probably know the answer to that, or at least have a ballpark. And Molly Hitch, if you're listening, I apologize. I will take a PDP slap on the wrist for not knowing that off the top of my head. But they are, if we can link after the podcast, I believe we can link to the currently approved PDP courses that are on the NBAA website and those providers. And you can search those at any time if you're looking for a PDP course specific to HR or tax regulation or hiring best practices or any of that good stuff. There's a great resource on the NBAA website for that.
Awesome. Definitely. I will. We'll make sure we put that link up there. So those that are listening, just keep an eye on the details below. There will be a link on that. Very cool.
Awesome.
Well, Kellie, you were talking about you were in sales before, but that's not your most recent role, right? I believe you got a promotion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I started in sales and I learned a ton from Steve and the team on that aspect of the business and getting plugged in with all the organizations that we work with and all the great customers we have. But I did have a bit of an itch to get back into the operational side and help our customers beyond the training scope of what we provide through Polaris Aero and the VOCUS platform. So with that being said, the leadership team Trent Fox and Chris Connor are great about, finding your passion and your why, and then, turning you loose to go do that in a way that supports the business. And they said, you know what, there's a lot of opportunity here for helping our customers beyond that scope. And we just started running with it. One of the first opportunities that came up was before we even officially launched our services division, was a customer that came to us and said, hey, I am pregnant with twins and we just got VOCUS up and running and it's going so well. And I'm terrified of what's going to happen in 3 months time span of me taking maternity leave. Do you guys provide any support while I'm gone? Like, I don't want to lose our momentum. We've been doing so great. And so I stepped in and helped her through maternity leave and just sort of making sure things stayed on pace. And she didn't walk back in after 3 months of hanging out with her sweet babies and walk in and have 3 months of backlog worth to deal with. So that was our kickoff into the services division. And so we've got interim safety officer support where we plug in with all these different operations and show them best practices. We can go in and optimize the way that you're using the VOCUS platform, show you some areas where you can dig further into, everything up through like culture surveys and figuring out, beyond the platform, where are some cultural ways that we can make change with our safety program and adaptation and understanding of the system and what should go in and what should be coming out of that by way of insights and all that good stuff. So I've really, really enjoyed that. It's been such a fun experience to get plugged back into the organizational side.
Oh my gosh, Kelly, I had no idea you guys were doing that. So you're similar to like what we do at LD Aviation where we plug in but on the safety side. Maybe afterwards we can talk because I bet I have a client that would really need your help. What a great idea.
Look at this networking. Look, there we go.
That's right. Yes, I can get you guys a new client and you can help mine, be better at what they're doing. Oh, that is so cool. And so that's been about a year that you've been doing that.
Yes, it's a bit of a slow start. I mean, we wanted to grow in a responsible way with that product and that service. So, and part of that is taking over the way that we do training and making that a more efficient process in an effective process for our customers that we're onboarding. So that's been our main focus for the front end of that. Now we're really in a place where we can launch those services and grow that part of the business now that we've got a couple of under our belts, so to speak. And we're really excited about what the future holds for that and being able to help our customers in that capacity and more of helping with local and regional groups with thought leadership presentations and some training aspects and maybe even a PDP course or a couple of those. We'd love to spend some time really educating people on not the boring side of safety, but how you can make it insightful and impactful in your organization and less of I'm not going to say in a boring way. Most people associate safety with being boring, but in an insightful and an impactful way.
Yeah, sometimes I think people, they feel like it's a chore. It's like something that they have to do. But I will say that your product, at least the one that we use, the VOCUS part of it, really makes it easy and intuitive. And it's not a chore. It makes it easy for me to read the highlights that I really need to know. So that's super cool.
Appreciate that. Yeah, great. I know that a lot of folks, especially on your side, on the scheduling front, a lot of folks that are using it most efficiently have it from the scheduling point of view. Like it starts there. And that's really where you start to get a lot of the business efficiency out of it, right? Like you're seeing that weather front move through and you're able to call up and get on the hangar list before anybody else. And you don't have that de-icing bill. You don't have to do the 11th hour firefight of changing all the transportation because we just now saw a NOTAM that popped up. I mean, that's really on your side of things, getting that business efficiency out of your SMS instead of just the boring safety stuff.
Hands down. I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, when we try and incorporate that into like a 7-day in advance notifications, we're looking at that. We do 7 days and we do 48 hours and 24 hours. And that saved our butt more than once.
I love that. Oh, I love to hear that.
So I wanted to also recognize a cool achievement that you got. You were nominated as one of the top 40 under 40 in 2022. So congratulations on that. And what was that like?
I was very, very honored, humbled to have been nominated for that. I mean, never saw that coming. And I really appreciate the nomination for that. I mean, when you're going through and just sort of grinding it out like I was in 2021, 2022, doing all the things, it's very very nice to be nominated for such an award. So, and being in the class of 40 under 40 recipients that I was in, I mean, just looking around the room, I was like, are they, do they need me? Like, is there another Kellie? I feel like there was some sort of mistake. So
very deserving.
It was, thank you. I appreciate that. It was such a rewarding experience and one that I will certainly cherish for many, many years.
Very cool. Congratulations. And I just wanted, real quick, kind of towards the end here, if you're thinking about maybe people who want to come into this business and they're new, what would you suggest they do? Anything that was like really helpful in your career that you think would help other people?
The number one thing I would say beyond what we've touched on was saying yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to get into a position where you can say yes to different opportunities. And that comes, and this side of the business, that comes by way of networking. And a lot of people have like a bad taste in their mouth with the word networking. It's really building relationships and putting yourself out there and having conversations and getting yourself in the room with the right people that can afford you those opportunities. So a lot of people see networking as just like a way to find your next job. And while that can certainly be the case in some aspects, it's more of the relationship building and the people that you can call on as mentors and the things that, the things I've learned from mentors of just being in the same room with people that I would never even think I could learn something from. And that has really propelled my career faster than any other single thing I could relate to someone.
Great suggestion. Yeah, great suggestion. I always find I may learn something that has nothing to do with what I'm doing right now. And inevitably down the road, I'm like, I'm really glad I learned that because I'm going to use it right here. You just never know where you're going to put that to work.
Absolutely. I'll say one thing that does put you in the room, especially if you've got a little bit of experience under your belt and you are kind of looking to make it to that next level, like director level or chief pilot level, something like that, would be NBAA's CAM program. And while that is a benchmark of best practices and making sure that you understand best practices across the domains, the biggest takeaway from that CAM program is the people that it puts you in the room with. So they have a lot of like CAM specific events that they do. They have a lot of PDP courses that they offer specifically to CAMs. Mm-hmm. And the people that are at that table, oh my goodness, that is the biggest impact that you can have by pursuing that CAM credential. So I can't speak highly enough of that program that they offer through NBAA.
That's also true. And I find people reach out to me on LinkedIn just because of that CAM on the back of the name. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great program. I'd agree. I would do that again, hands down. Although I'm going to try not to let mine expire so I don't have to do the test again. But I am definitely glad I did that.
Yes.
Very cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome, Kellie. Well, it's been so great talking to you. What an inspiration and what an example of you may fly. I mean, you have all of your flight certificates and you did fly, but a good transition into the operations side of that's also a way to go. You can fly and come to operations or go from operations back out to flying. Very cool. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate the conversation. This has been great.
Likewise. Hopefully we can talk to you again soon, Kellie.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for more episodes and check out our website for up-and-coming podcasts. This has been a production of the Business Aviation Collective, sponsored by LD Aviation.